Governor Spotswood was a military brat, and he grew up to be an explorer, a soldier, a professional politician, a professional governor, a favorite of the Queen, which is no small thing. And he was also very anxious to make peace with the people here in the colony. He was a reasonably benevolent governor, which is a good thing when you're trying to govern people you don't know. Spotswood was born in the English colony of Tangier, Morocco, in 1676. He was the son of Robert Spotswood, surgeon to the English garrison there. His mother returned to England with her son in 1683. In 1693, he began his military career as an ensign, rising through the ranks to lieutenant colonel. He grew up in Tangier, born near Morocco. So his daddy had served in the army, and Spotswood enlisted early on and did very well. He was quickly a quartermaster and did all sorts of wonderful things in the army. When Queen Anne signed his commission, he is sent across the ocean to govern Virginia. He was the lieutenant governor. Lord Orkney was the full governor, who never came to Virginia. Orkney received most of the governor's salary, but none of the grief. Governor Spotswood got less than half the money, but all the heat, all the mosquitoes, all the temper tantrums, all the fear of sinking in the ocean and then having to live in a strange new world. Governor Spotswood was anxious to make the governor's palace a jewel, and he spent so much money on it that the people in Virginia began to say, oh, it's a palace, not just a governor's residence, but making Spotswood more like the king. And of course, he was the representative of the crown, and Governor Spotswood, probably in the back of his mind, is thinking, well, Virginia can just be a little bit of England. And so we have great estates here and there. The river flows beautifully, the sheep look pretty, or the cows look pretty in the field. And if I have a deer park with deer that run, that I can look at the pretty deer, it will remind me of home. So Governor Spotswood spends a great deal of money on the residence, and pretty soon it becomes his palace. At the same time he's here, the rector of this church is James Blair. And James Blair is a pretty hard-headed cleric, but he's looking to the needs of his flock. You know, clergy at the very best are shepherds, and we are their flock. So he's looking at the first brick church completed in 1683 that is falling apart, and he's thinking it's definitely time for a new one, especially since 1699, Williamsburg has been the new capital of Virginia. Not only was the College of William and Mary here, but burgesses and members of the General Assembly come into town whenever the governor calls them into session. So Blair and the vestry turn to Alexander Spotswood and ask for a plan, or what they called a draft. And Governor Spotswood, being a smooth-tongued politician, says, well, I'm not an architect, gentlemen, but I will do my best. And historians tell us he literally turned the job over to geometry. He took a Root 2 rectangle, which is the nave of the church. He expanded it into a cruciform structure. He figured out exactly how big it was going to be, and then he played an interesting game of political chess and said, well, perhaps the people could pay for one part, and the government could pay for another part, and he could pay for a part, and ultimately it would all get built. So Governor Spotswood has a great hand in getting this church finished. Bruton was unusual in receiving funds from the General Assembly. The government's contribution constituted 28% of the total budget. The cost was shared proportionately between the parish and the government. For all other parishes, of which there were about 100 by the time of the Revolution, parishioners shouldered the total cost of church construction. At the same time, Spotswood worries about the Indians. He worried about the frontier. A far-sighted governor, Spotswood promoted backcountry growth. He and his Knights of the Golden Horseshoe expedition explored the region between the Blue Ridge and the Alleghenies in 1716. He's worrying about the pirates. He's worrying about the weather. He's worrying about getting more people over here. I'm sure he's wondering when can I go home? Or am I going to have to stay here forever? And I'm sure that was a big part of his time, was worrying about the future. He was governor for 12 years, ending in 1722, after which he became a Virginian himself. He settled in Germanna in Spotsylvania County. He constructed the first ironworks in the South and became a major producer of iron, which he exported primarily to England, while also manufacturing iron products for Virginia. According to one story, he commandeered a ship full of folks from an area in Germany who probably thought they were coming to the New World for a great opportunity, and they ended up being workers for an iron furnace. So Governor Spotswood immediately planted them in the area near Germanna and put them to work. So they definitely got a new experience, but I don't know if it's what they had counted on. The German influence in Virginia, some of it trickles down from Pennsylvania, because in the Pennsylvania area we have the German refugees from the Palatinate. We have folks who got caught in religious warfare and who come to the New World looking for an opportunity, and they become what we call the Pennsylvania Dutch. They're, Amish, Mennonite, the old Dunkards, some of the other folks who find a new home in Pennsylvania. Well, after a while, some of the younger generations probably want to expand a little more, and maybe they have adventurous blood, and so they come on down into the Valley of Virginia. When you get out by Roanoke, there's a lot of the German, and then you begin to get some Presbyterians, which is Scotch-Irish, but you're far enough away from the capital city and from this church that it probably isn't going to make the world stop. They're pretty far away, and somebody pays the tax and the tithe, and somebody else leaves them alone, and so these little other meeting houses begin to spring up out in the Valley of Virginia. And if you get out into what we call Western Virginia, there are lots of names that are not perfectly English. And it's a fascinating piece of Virginia history, but there were other folks here. Not everybody wore a white powdered wig, and not everybody had ruffles at their throat. There were all kinds of people here. Prayer books say all sorts and conditions, and that's exactly what we had. Governor Spotswood eventually tangles with James Blair. I would love to have been a fly on the wall to watch Governor Spotswood in the governor's chair and Dr. Blair over here in the pulpit, and the two of them at odds. I think the body language would probably have spoken volumes. Eventually, Dr. Blair is able to get rid of Governor Spotswood. Dr. Blair was fond of running home to England and complaining to the monarchs about what was going on. The governor was also very good at writing letters and trying to get everybody on his side. Politics is a slippery game, and both of these men were excellent players. So eventually Spotswood marries and stays in Virginia, and he marries a widow. Marrying a wealthy widow is absolutely the way to go. A great many of these men did it. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Jimmy Madison, and I could go on and on and on. But a wealthy widow who has property, a poor widow, no matter how beautiful she might be, is not a good investment. But a wealthy widow is the way to go. And so Governor Spotswood is one of the many who falls into that category. But he did leave descendants, which is really quite wonderful. And some of those, as I said, live in this area. This is not about genealogy. None of this is meant to be for people who are looking up their great-great-great-great-grandfather. But it's really fun to see how the marriages connect people. And you'll find that some of Governor Spotswood's descendants end up years later being connected to another governor whose name was Patrick Henry. But Spotswood was a tough old soldier, very, very attractive man from the portraits we have left of him. And it's great fun for me because descendants of Governor Spotswood still live in Williamsburg, and they still live over in Gloucester. And so I can actually look at some of them and kind of imagine genetically, they favor Governor Spotswood a little bit. They've got the same tough jawline and the same dark eyes, and a couple of them have the same attitude. I mean, they absolutely know who they are. One of the things Spotswood does while governor of Virginia is to decide that he is going to rid the waters of the pirates. which was probably way more than he could ever do. Pirates were plying the coast from north to south. Some people were making an awful lot of profit. And Governor Spotswood had some pretty serious talks with other governors, and he had some pretty serious talks with his militia folks, and figured that there was going to be a way they could stop these pirates. After all, people here in Virginia have all their homes on the water. If pirates sail up the bay into your river and up to your dock at your plantation, they can literally burn your house down. They can steal all of your servants. They can massacre or barbecue your animals. Pirates were a big deal to be afraid of. A little bit later, Spotswood is dealing with the pirates. Only a couple of years, actually. The pirates were everywhere, and frequently they were Spanish or Portuguese. Sometimes they were other countries, but they were an enormous threat. And the most famous of the pirates in American history, I think, is probably Blackbeard, and especially in this area. Well, Governor Spotswood had to deal with the other governors because piracy existed for our purposes from Florida, which is a Spanish possession, all the way to Pennsylvania and beyond. Well, wherever the English have a foothold, they're going to be dealing with pirates. Our immediate concern is either the Virginia coast or the North Carolina coast. Well, Governor Eden of North Carolina was not happy having Governor Spotswood stick his hand or his nose or his vision on what was going on the Carolina coast, but Blackbeard was everywhere. He had a very particular relationship or particular friendship with Governor Eden, who was thought to be in cahoots with Blackbeard, or at the very least, looked the other way at Blackbeard's activities. Not so with Governor Spotswood, who planned to rid the coast of this menace once and for all. The way Spotswood went after him was to secure the services of a couple of British frigates anchored off the coast of Virginia. One was captained by Lieutenant Robert Maynard, whom he trusted, to go after Blackbeard and bring him down. The engagement with Blackbeard took place near Ocracoke, which is just off what we call Nag's Head, and there was a tremendous fight. Blackbeard, of course, with his fancy beard plaited and beribboned, and then with flaming matches in his hair and beard, he was quite a sight. Maynard won, and somebody beheaded Blackbeard and brought the head back on the bowsprit of Maynard's ship. Then the pirates who survived actually got brought all the way to Williamsburg for trial. A number of them spent some very unhappy time in the Williamsburg jail, which is down near the Capitol. And then they were tried. Most of them were sentenced, and the sentence they received was to be hung. There are two ways to go about hanging a pirate. You can either just hang him, or you can hang him and then put his corpse out for what they called sun drying, which means they hang him in chains and then they let him rot. That leaves a warning for everybody else. Governor Spotswood is right smack in the middle of all this. While he's running all the Williamsburg business and overseeing things at the Capitol and worrying about whether France is going to try to invade, he's also dealing with the pirate issue. So Williamsburg is famous for having tried and executed quite a number of Blackbeard's pirates. There was a chaplain at the jail who was called the Ordinary of the Newgate, taking a term from the London system. And that chaplain would go with whoever is to be hung out to the gallows, which is off at the end of Capitol Landing Road. Not all of Blackbeard's crew tried in Williamsburg were hanged. A couple of them did get off. Spotswood was appointed Deputy Postmaster General of America in 1730, an office he held until his death. He was largely responsible for setting up the first successful postal system in the colonies. After the Crown replaced him as Lieutenant Governor in 1722, he settled in Germanna in Spotsylvania County and built a large house there. He went to England in 1724, where he married Anne Butler Brain of Westminster. He returned to Virginia in 1730 with his family, where he lived in Germanna in the gracious but simple elegance of the Virginia County gentlemen of that day. Benjamin Franklin began his postal career in 1737 as postmaster of Philadelphia under the British Parliamentary Post, a couple of years before Spotswood's death. By 1753, Franklin had been promoted to one of 2 deputy postmasters of North America, along with William Hunter of Williamsburg. So Governor Spotswood dies by 1740. Franklin came to Williamsburg to receive an honorary degree at the college in 1756 and to consult with William Hunter, the other deputy postmaster for North America. Also, Franklin and William Parks did do business in connection with Parks Paper Mill and the production of paper for printers. Franklin was back in Williamsburg in the early 1760s to consult with the executor of William Hunter's estate. Governor Spotswood, as he is exploring and enlarging Virginia, includes Indian schools. Fort Christiana was designed to offer protection and schooling to the tributary Siouan and Iroquoian tribes living to the southwest of the colonized area of Virginia in what became Brunswick County, Virginia. Fort Christiana was closed in 1718, after which schooling for Indian boys was concentrated at the Indian school, the Bruton, at the College of William and Mary. Of course, we had an Indian school at the College of William and Mary, and there were Indian boys brought from the tribes to Williamsburg to be converted and to learn the English ways. The master of the Indian school was the principal instructor, usually an ordained Church of England minister like the other faculty members at the college. Although the Indian school was not seen by white Virginians as a great success, Indian boys at the Indian school at William and Mary were housed and taught in the Bruton, which is the big building just to the left of the College of William and Mary's centerpiece, which is the Wren Building. The young men had to learn the same things that the English children and the African children had to learn. It was a huge adjustment for these boys. The Lord's Prayer, the Apostles' Creed, and the Ten Commandments, and the Catechism. They had to wear English clothes, eat English food, live inside when their natural environment is to live outside unless they're in a longhouse. There are a number of people who were masters of the Indian school who did a wonderful job. There's a funny old story about one of the men telling a chief that he wanted to get the chief's son to come to the college. And the chief was very polite and also a very good politician. And he commented that it would make more sense to have the English bring him their boys, and he would make men out of them, as opposed to taking his children and making them like the English. So there was a lot of friendly competition, and there was a lot of unfriendly activity as well. But working with the Native American people was a big deal. And even when you fast forward to Mr. Washington and Mr. Henry, when he was governor, and a number of other leaders working with the natives who are translators or who are scouts or spies, becomes very important as to how your military stuff goes, because you've got to be able to get along and know who's friendly and who isn't. So Governor Spotswood is famous for that too. He died in Annapolis, Maryland in 1740 while raising troops for the British campaign against the Spanish in South America. Governor Spotswood is shown often in a bright red coat with a powdered wig, and he just looks like he's in command of the world, and I'm quite sure that's what he thought.